Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. 4 years ago, I was at the UN attending a conference when I was foreign minister. There were 3 African speakers, African women speakers, and 3 speakers from other parts of the world. When any other speaker stood up to go and speak, they distributed the speech, the presentation. When the African woman stood to speak, there was no speech distributed. At the end, somebody asked, what about the African women? We want to share their speeches. And somebody said, well, African women are storytellers. They don't write speeches. This comes from the heart. In 1989, I was privileged, sponsored by the United States government, to come to the US on a study tour. I will fast forward from where my sister stopped off. She talked about me being in an abusive marriage and walking out with my 3 children at age 31. And made up my mind at that point to say, I shall never allow myself to be abused again. And that I was going to empower myself. And I knew that the reason why I had suffered is because I was not economically empowered. And as I set out to liberate myself, I also found another husband. The second time, of course, I was able to bargain. And so, after running my business for about 5 years, I was sponsored by the US government, came to the US, had a rare opportunity of interacting with organizations, women's organizations, particularly one that was called the National Association of Women Business Owners. At that point, I was bothered. I was wondering what was it that I could do to reach out and empower fellow women that were locked up in abusive marriages but had no courage to walk out. I shall therefore be forever grateful to the government of the US for that opportunity, because that is what set me up this journey. I'm also proud to be here today because President Bill Clinton is one person that I admire. And I followed his career, read so much about him, but what I didn't know is that when he finally came to Malawi to work in Malawi, I would be foreign minister and I would host him and I would sign the agreement with him. And so coming here today connects me to what he is so passionate about. We share so much. I had an opportunity to have a long discussion with him when he was in Malawi. I started the Joyce Banda Foundation after working with women, as I said earlier, in 1998, after receiving the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. The Joyce Banda Foundation is built on 4 building blocks: universal values, global understanding, excellence, and service to humanity. And under global understanding, I've insisted that all the students coming to the Joyce Banda Foundation schools should be aware of what is happening on the global village. And so it is exciting for me to be here, particularly among students that are interested in what is happening beyond their own borders. I thought about what to talk about today among all the things that I have done, and I decided that I would just pick 3 areas. One is to talk about the situation and the effect of HIV and AIDS in Malawi. As you all know, the sub-Saharan Africa is the hardest hit region by HIV and AIDS. Malawi is not spared. Since the first case was diagnosed in 1985, we went up to 17% prevalence in 10 years. I'm pleased to report that with the initiatives the government put in place to fight the pandemic, we've come down to 12%. Malawi is currently providing free ARVs to almost 1/3 of those infected. One major impact of HIV and AIDS on Malawi is the orphan crisis. And that's where the Joyce Banda Foundation comes in. Allow me to say that there's so much good happening on the continent of Africa. And so I don't want to just depress you, but I want to demonstrate that against all odds, there's good leadership on the ground in Africa. There are women and men who are bringing about positive change. And allow me to say that Africans are ready and they know what to do to change their situation. It breaks my heart when I get the impression that sometimes international NGOs want to come into Malawi or in Africa and hope that they can change our situation and ignore us and not listen to us. But we know what to do. We've articulated our issues and we know what will move us from point A to point B, or we are looking for our partners. And that is why President Bill Clinton is a champion that Africans respect. Malawi currently has 1 million orphans as a result of AIDS. Out of these, it is estimated that about 11% of these affected are in child-headed or elderly-headed households. The orphans face a lot of problems: lack of education, especially secondary education, which in most countries in Africa is not free. They face psychological trauma, especially watching their parents and siblings chronically ill. They are stigmatized and discriminated against. They lack decent livelihood. And so as a leader on the ground, one that is self-made, because when I walked out of my abusive marriage, the last thing I ever expected in my lifetime was that I was going to be citizen number 2 in my country. So as a leader, I decided to do something about the situation. So after receiving the Africa Prize in 1997, jointly with President Chisano for the work that I had done in the field of the economic empowerment of women in Malawi, I established the Joyce Banda Foundation. Because when I worked at grassroots in Malawi, village to village, I found more women than men. And when I asked where their brothers and men were, they told me they were either doctors or teachers. They were in town, they were engineers. When the resources were low at household level, the boys had been sent to school, the girls didn't go. And so I had decided that if I ever get another opportunity in my life to do something about the situation of women in Malawi, I would contribute towards girls' education. So the prize money at this award ceremony was 100,000. But we jointly received this award with a whole head of state. And so we had to split the 100,000. So my prize money was $50,000. I remember telling President Chisano, you don't need $50,000. You are a whole president, Mr. President, just give it to me. And of course he refused. But I used my $50,000 to start the Joyce Banda Foundation for Education. I would like to share a story of one girl who had lost both parents due to AIDS. Having worked in women's economic empowerment, I had struggled I was frustrated. I had tried to tell the international community that we need support. But most often we find that NGOs, international NGOs come and they ignore indigenous NGOs. And we had to struggle to raise funds. And we had to struggle to convince the people that we are good leaders in Africa, they should work with us. So I decided at that point that I was going to establish a company first for profit that would raise money to allow me to educate the girl child. So the first school, the Joyce Banda Foundation, the students had to make a contribution. And Dorothy Tembo came to the school on the first day. She was one of the 3 girls that enrolled. But in her mind, Joyce Banda cannot establish a school where we need to contribute. And this poor child had just lost both her parents due to AIDS. So after one term, I asked the headmistress that I wanted to have a prize-giving ceremony for the best student of the previous year, the previous term. And the headmistress said, no, she left. She lost both parents to AIDS. She couldn't pay the $30 that she was supposed to make as a contribution, so she had to go. I said, you didn't tell me. Go and find this child. They went 8 hours away. They looked for Dorothy, brought her back to the school. She was the best student from first year to year 5. She was selected to go to Malawi University. She went to university and passed with credit. She got a scholarship to go to Makerere University, where she did her master's. I sit down often and wonder what could have happened to Dorothy if I hadn't asked, if I hadn't gone looking for her. So the tragedy is that many girls lose out in education because they don't have the means. And so immediately I started working towards establishing a free secondary school. So in the year 2001, the Joyce Banda Foundation was able to open its first free secondary school, providing education to 200 children. And as my sister has said, we now have 2,000 children receiving free secondary education, not only in our schools, but I sponsor children in all their schools. The tragedy is that it only costs me $50 to send this child to a school for a term, $150 for a year. And I think the fee for the whole year is 1 meal in a good restaurant here. So I don't know how many students we could send together to secondary schools. The greatest joy has been for me to see these girls go to school, finish education, go to university, come out and reach out and help fellow children. Dorothy is now working. She has bought herself a car, but she's also educating 5 more girls that she has adopted. We also established 30 orphan care centers with the children between the ages of 1 to 5. And we provide a meal a day, blankets. And on one occasion, one of the children in one community was sick. And I sent the rural coordinator to go and see this child in hospital. And he found that in all this poor little hospital, the parents have to bring a blanket for the child to the hospital, but the child was not covered, and it was cold. And Clement asked the guardian, and this child was an orphan, what about the blanket Mrs. Joyce Banda gave this child? And this lady said, listen, I have 4 children of my own. The best that I have done is even to adopt this child. You don't want to tell me that the one blanket in the house, I was going to bring it to the hospital and leave my 4 children without a blanket. And when she told me, that's how I said, yep, we start a microfinance program and target households that are guardian households. So now we provide microfinance and we target the guardian families, especially the elderly households. And that is why the Joyce Banda Foundation now has a total of 30,000 beneficiaries. One of my most favorite projects within those communities is a goat person project. And this I started by accident. I was given another award in 2007 here in the US by the Americans for UNFPA. Recognizing my work, it was called the International Award for Women's Health and Dignity. I have spent most of my adult life helping stop maternal death. I just don't think it's moral for us to allow a woman to die giving life to another human being. And so I started this Safe Motherhood project and started assisting women to fight maternal death. And so I found, going out in the villages, that women who had been diagnosed with AIDS, had been told by the hospital not to breastfeed, were still breastfeeding. And when I asked them, they said, "Tell me, Mom, if I have any choice. I don't have the means. This child needs food." So that's how, receiving this award, there was a lady sitting across from me who gave me $5,000 and said, "If I gave you $5,000, what would you do with it?" I said, "A lot. I'll buy goats." Because every village needs to have goats. Because the moment a village has got goats, then there's milk. And if there's milk in that village, I'm told goat's milk, I'm not a nutritionist, is very nutritious. So I started a project where 10 people in the village receive goats. One goat goes to the chief, because if you don't give the chief, he will grab those from the women anyway. And the agreement they sign with me is that they owe me $30. And that from the $30, instead of giving me $30, they will pass on the offspring of this goat to another family. Those that started that project, the first recipients, have now got 10 goats. So we started in 50 villages. Now in 100 villages, there's no need for any child to go without milk. So apart from the economic aspect of that project, the nutrition in that area has improved tremendously. I'm saying this just to demonstrate on how little amounts make a lot of difference in Malawi. Allow me to also share another project. I came here 4 years ago, and a friend of mine by the name of Jack Brewer donated $10,000. My country has a very good project, a food subsidy program, where they provide inputs to poor families at a very low cost. With the $10,000, we were then able to provide those families with the money to allow them to buy the fertilizer, because even with that coupon, they still don't buy the fertilizer. And so we provided resources to 1,000 families who graduated from poverty forever with $10,000. I would like to say, finally, that it is very important for us to encourage women leaders on the continent. Because small projects like these that make a lot of difference at grassroots can be overlooked by a male leader. But I know, having come from an abusive marriage, having grown up in the village, how important it is for us to encourage women leaders. We have no choice in Africa but to invest in women. It breaks my heart. I've got friends here who have visited Malawi, who have seen the difference that it makes to have an opportunity to go to school. I come from a village where my father was one of the few that were privileged to work in town. So we lived 15 kilometers away. But my grandmother insisted that every weekend I needed to be in the village so that I learned the village life, because she felt it was going to be very important for me when I grow up. And I thank God, because it has, in a different way from what she expected. She thought I would end up getting married in the village, but what it has done is to make me aware and sensitive to issues of rural women. And in this village, I had a very good friend, same age as me, but she was going to the village school. I went to the town school. Every Friday, I found her at the roadside waiting for me when I came. She taught me all the things I needed to do about village life. But she was brighter than me. In school, she was the best student throughout her primary school. When we got to standard 6, we were both selected to go to secondary school. I went to Providence Secondary School, she went to St. Mary's Secondary School, the best 2 schools for girls in Malawi. She went 1 term, and the parents couldn't raise fees for the next term. So she had to leave school and go back home. She got married at 16. She had her first child that same year. I went on and finished school because my father could pay. I'm here as vice president of my country, and she's still in the village where she was. And what hurt me, 2 weeks ago I learned that that child that was born when she was 16 is dying of AIDS. So I feel that as a woman leader, I don't even have any choice but to invest more in girls' education. And I thank you all for your partnership. I thank those that are interested to assist us to educate more and more girls on the African continent. Allow me to end my remarks by sharing a story that my grandmother told me when I was 9 years old. There was an animal kingdom. King Elephant and all the animals in the village lived very happily until this particular year there was a severe famine, and thousands of animals were dying because there was no food. And the few that remained were flocking together. And the giraffe with its long neck said, "Your Majesty, I think somebody is cooking food ahead of us. I see smoke." And the king said, "No, that's not possible. There can't be any food in this forest." So they moved, increased their pace, walked towards the spot, and indeed found a little hare there with a few animals sitting around with a big pot on the fire, and whatever it was he was cooking was boiling furiously. And the other animals were passing on firewood to little hare to allow this fire to keep burning. And so King Elephant said, "Oh, little hare, so while all of us are starving, you have food?" And little hare said, "No, Your Majesty, I'm not cooking food. I'm boiling stones. I'm boiling stones because I hope that one day these stones will turn into pumpkins." And so all the animals started laughing at him, some were angry, walking away. Little hare stood there frustrated and shouted behind the king and said, "Your Majesty, at least I'm doing something about the situation. At least I'm doing something about the situation." And those other animals were sitting around passing firewood because they believed in what he was saying, that one day these stones would turn into pumpkins. And I just thank all of you, those of you in this room who are standing by and watching some of us boil stones and have faith in us and believe in us that these pumpkins we're boiling one day will turn into pumpkins. I thank you for your partnership, and may God bless you all.
The Vice President said she would take a couple of questions. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. I knew there would be some. Bob, right here. Wait for the microphone.
My name is Renata Williams.
Don't go. You might need to answer some of them.
My name is Renata Williams. I'm the editor of the Empowerment Initiative, and I'm also the Communications Director for African Women Health Project International. My question is, how can organizations here in the United States, African American organizations / African organizations here, link to help yours to really improve the betterment of Africa?
Do you want to answer this? He just wanted to know how.
Okay.
He
Yeah.
wanted how.
The Joyce Banda Foundation is registered in the US as a not-for-profit 501 operating in Africa. So not only in Malawi, but in other countries as well. So it's easy. We are based in Washington.
I have a question right here in the back.
I think I'll echo the others in the room that probably that was a most wonderful and motivating story, and so thank you for the work that you're doing. I have a question about you. Malawi, as you know, is a major tobacco agricultural country. The majority of its foreign exchange market is in tobacco, and obviously women and children are employed in that agriculture, which keeps them more in an impoverished state. So I'm wondering if you can address what you're doing as a leader in working with those women and children who are stuck on the tobacco farms and growing and supported by the tobacco industries to do so.
When I was gender minister in the year 2004, that's the first time the American government told me that child labor is also human trafficking. And I was determined to change that situation. We moved from tier 2 to tier 1 rating because we had to fight some of those habits where people recruit children, not only in the tobacco sector, but also in the tea sector. The solution is to encourage as many children as possible to go to school. Unfortunately for Malawi now, primary school is free. So we encourage our children, we are encouraging our children to go to school. But when I was gender minister, I also launched what we call zero tolerance campaign against child abuse. And we also launched what we call the National Call to Action for Vulnerable Children and Orphans. Under that national program, the government is also sponsoring students that end up on those estates to go to school. So initiatives are on the ground. In any case, we are working desperately now to divert from tobacco to other sectors because of the international campaign against smoking.
Before I take the next question, let me take a point of personal privilege to introduce to you. In the room today is a gentleman who knows Malawi very well, the former United States ambassador to Malawi, Ambassador Alan Easton, right here. So for those of you that have questions later on, just go to Ambassador Easton. He can help as well. All right, got time for one more question right here.
Thank you, Honorable Vice President. My name is Chatonda Chiro. I come from Mzimba, Malawi.
Really?
Yes, and I have my 2 children here.
When are you coming home?
I came to the United States to study, because I couldn't make it to the Malawi University because of one reason. In 1989, that's when I was in the 12th grade, like going to university. But I couldn't make it because of the quota system that we have in Malawi. Yeah. And Mzimba, as such, is the biggest district in Malawi. And we are like maybe 200,000. But the quota system is like maybe 20 per district. I was doing really great in secondary school, but I couldn't make that top. You really need to be a genius. Yeah, so I came to the United States, and now I have a bachelor degree in science, technology, and I'm planning on taking masters too, but my children too are, coming behind me who will be doing things all together. So my question is, when are you going to remove this quota system? But it's like it limits, you know, there are a lot of intelligent people out there. They can't go to university in Malawi, but it's only one university in Malawi. So how are you going to help maybe solve this problem, remove the quota system? Every intelligent person should get access to good education. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. It is an issue that is being seriously considered in Malawi. I don't know if you heard the latest announcement that the president has decided to build 5 more universities. But what we think should be done immediately as well, that's my personal opinion, is also to increase bed space at the current university that we have and allow enrollment to grow from the 5,000 students, maybe to double it to 10,000 students. But that is of great concern to most of us, and we know that we must do something about the situation as quickly as possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, you gave her a standing ovation once. I think she deserves another one. The Vice President of Malawi, the Honorable Joyce Banda.